We've missed you, Victory Monday. Hello, Victory Monday. Nice to see you, Victory Monday. It's the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Forrest. He's Irish O'Fell, managing editor of Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang. You're watching here on Warchant TV. We are grateful for those of you that are stopping in right now. Give us a thumbs up as you enter into tonight's program. Good evening, Ira. 42-7. Just when you think you got this team figured out, they do something crazy, like win a ball game where they start with the first 42 points of the night on Saturday. How's it going for you? And 48 hours later, what do you make of what you saw this weekend?
You know, it was good. I mean, it was good to just feel what a win feels like. I got to imagine it felt great for the players, certainly for the coaches. Again, from a big picture standpoint, we don't know how big of a deal it is other than maybe just kind of extending things a little bit. But in terms of, I mean, I bet you there's guys on that team that, just forgot what it felt like to win a football game. Because even the 2 games they won before the 4-game losing streak were not exactly a lot of fun. So you got to go back to really the Alabama game for that actually had a win against an FBS type team, even though I guess Kent State technically is an FBS team. But I think it was good. It was good for homecoming. I think that's awesome. The fans that were there got to enjoy a win, and it was a comfortable win. So all that was cool. But, I know you and Jeff talked about it and Corey Nazelon talked about it. And I'm sure everybody agrees that it doesn't necessarily change anything for the big picture. It just maybe takes away the chance of something happening immediately.
Well, I'm not sure if you agree totally with this or not, but it did seem like in the beginning, as Wake hit a couple of explosives that got called back for holding calls, was just amazing. It's great to see the ACC officials with an assist there. It was at that point things started to settle down, and I felt like the play of the night was the throw to Deuce Robinson, the first long one. I know he connected with Deuce. I think it was the first 3rd and long of the game, and it was a nothing screen for a couple of yards. But that shot down the sidelines for 60 yards, it felt like everybody kind of exhaled at that point, and then they just went and played football. And then from there, it built upon itself, and Florida State left that field, Ira, a hell of a lot more confident than I think they ran out of that tunnel. Would you agree with that based upon what you saw and maybe some of the things you heard in postgame from either people behind the scenes or the press conferences themselves?
Yeah, I think the just the fact that they, weren't in a hole, even 7-0's not great, but it's better than being tied or being behind. And then when they went up 14-0, I think that was huge. I think if they could have come out of halftime and scored after the half, which is still legal, I think you're allowed to do that. Florida State never does it, but I think that would have been, the capper. That didn't happen, but they ended up pulling away. So, I think, again, you saw some guys start playing with more confidence. Again, we don't know what this means in terms of the big picture, but for guys individually, you saw, I think, James Williams, it seemed like he started playing a little bit more confidently. Jaden Jones, those guys on the defensive line. I think, players on offense. I mean, I think Sam Singleton, it was good for him to be in a game that, where it actually meant something and he had some success. That's got to do a lot for him. I think a lot of guys probably took something positive of it. Again, a whole different task doing it on the road, but for one night, it was definitely positive.
It's just a bizarre time we live in college football. The Wake Forest the week before takes down SMU, a team that beat Miami the following week. They beat Miami on Saturday. Wake turned the ball over 5 times against SMU and still won, largely because its defense was able to swarm, play aggressive, play physical. And while Florida State didn't start in an inspired fashion on offense, by the time the night was over, I think a lot of us were saying, well, which Wake is the real Wake defensively? It looked like for once, Ira, for the first time in a while in an ACC football game, it was the other team that spiraled on the other sideline and not Florida State. And maybe that's the start of something. It's certainly better than the alternative as you're hitting the road this week and going to play Clemson at 7 o'clock on Saturday night.
Yeah, and I think from a standpoint of, even if you don't want Mike Norvell to be your head coach next season, and I'm sure there's plenty of people watching this that feel like that, you still want to know that the players on this roster, a lot of them who are going to be back next year. You don't want to clear house completely, that some of them are getting better and that they're playing hard and they're giving effort, even if in difficult circumstances. So from that standpoint, yeah, man, every play that Mekhi Danzy makes, every play that Sam Singleton makes, every play that certainly those younger defensive linemen, Kevin Wynn and the Desir twins and all those guys, everything they do, that's showing that they're still competing is a positive for Florida State football in the future, no matter who's coaching. But yeah, I think, Wake Forest is not built to be down 2 or 3 scores. And that's why, when actually at the end of the first half, when Florida State went up 14-0 and then Wake got the ball and I think they were trying to throw it. And I was saying to Corey, if I'm Norvell and he saw 3 timeouts, I'm calling timeouts and I'm trying to, or if they had run it and not gained anything, I'm calling timeouts to try to get the ball back again. Because you could have gone for the knockout blow in the first half and you're getting the ball to start second half. So yeah, I mean, I think Wake, once they got behind, they're having to play a different style of football than they want to play. I think it was not too surprising that things got out of hand. But honestly, the offense, it's a good day at the office for the offense, but a lot of it's Deuce Robinson and him just being, unguardable, at least for their defensive back. So, a few of the touchdowns were set up by Deuce's huge plays. And if you don't get those, and in some games you haven't gotten those because Tommy didn't make the throw or the DBs got away with pass interference or whatever the situation was, what do those drives look like then? I've been pretty down on the offense the last few weeks. Obviously Stanford was ridiculous. The fact they couldn't score when they were moving the football. And then, the second half of the Pitt game. And, there's just been some droughts for this offense, even though it's so highly ranked nationally. And in that game, it's great what they did, but I, again, Deuce counts. But if you don't get those plays, it's not like I felt like the offense was just humming. I thought it was a lot of big plays.
Yeah, yes, exactly right. A lot of explosives. And that's where it leaves you wondering for the Pitt game, had Deuce not gotten hurt in that moment, what happens for Florida State offensively, because players do matter. That's something you bring up all the time, is players, not plays. And Deuce Robinson is definitely one of those. That dude would have been in the rotation, Ira, on a lot of Florida State's great football teams in the last 15 years. It seems like to me that when you're talking about the best receivers Florida State's had, going back to, I don't know, 15 years, let's say, to 2010, Deuce is emerging. He's having that type of a season where it puts him on the short list. It's not just about measurables. It's not just about a highlight catch here or there. The total repertoire it's turning into something pretty awesome to watch week in and week out.
Yeah. And, we, again, going back to, you and I had a unique perspective of the whole recruitment because talking to Dominic Robinson throughout that process. And I just thought, from what I watched him at USC, I just felt like, man, every time he had an opportunity, it seemed like he played really well. And, you didn't know how he would handle being the number one guy. Like, that was a bit of a question. He hadn't really been the number one guy in a college offense. But as I reminded Corey and Matt in the press box, and I'll remind you now, I think somebody on the staff had him number 1 on our Warchant top 40. So I'm gonna take the credit for that. I've taken plenty of arrows for bad picks, so I'm gonna take the credit for having Deuce number 1. Man, I think he's been everything they could have hoped for. I thought he was going to be huge from a production standpoint, but then also just all the off the field stuff. That's kind of what I was really excited about with him, is just being a guy, a leader that got everybody together and, set the stage for what it means to be a college football player, not just go through the motions, not take meetings and strength, workouts optional, just to be a pro's pro. And he's done that. So he's had that impact. But then he also has had it on the field as well. It's been really cool to see, man. Again, Corey and I were talking about this at the game a little bit, but there are, whoever's the coach next year, if they can get Deuce to come back, and if you can get, obviously Mackay sticking with football, he's gonna have to make a decision at some point, probably with track and field, but between those guys, and if Singleton is really something, and Chroma, it develops to what we think, and Amari Williams and Landon Thompson, there are some pieces on this offense. They're going to have to rebuild the offensive line. We'll see what any of these young guys, maybe Lucas Simmons and Otto and some of those guys, can step up. Sandman Thompson, they really like at center. So maybe you don't have to go get 5 offensive linemen, but you are going to have to rebuild it some. But there's a lot to like on this offense. And obviously both sides of the ball. I think there's some nice young talent on the defense too. So if there is a coaching change or not, I don't think the next head coach, or whoever the head coach is going to be starting with a bare cupboard, unless guys just all bail.
I'd like to remind you, I had Deuce Robinson number 5 with the likes of James Williams ahead of him, Ira. So there you go. They're 1 for 1 there. I think we both hit on those picks. So now that Florida State's through 2/3 of the season, it's, you've got a few winnable games. A couple of winnable games I would circle right away. Virginia Tech in 2 weeks. That's now a 7:30 kick that was announced today. primetime Noles for the rest of the season. We'll see what the Florida game is, but playing primetime this weekend, next weekend for the home finale, then a Friday night against NC State. They got a couple of cracks at this bowl eligibility plus thing. I think obviously if you're shooting for 7 wins, you probably want to get this one this weekend against Clemson on the road. But now that we're 2/3 of the way through the season, as roller coastery as it's been, Ira, because the peak obviously was week 1, the valley was a month, a month long, with a 4-game losing streak. How would you describe this team? Is there a word in the dictionary that can aptly describe what this team has been so far through 8 games?
I think it's a team that doesn't have a ton of depth, and it's a team that hasn't shown a great ability to, overcome adversity. I think that they've competed in all these games. I never felt like they quit in any of these games. Stanford, it just was lackluster. I mean, they just didn't look like whether it was the travel or the time or whatever it was, they just didn't seem like they really showed up for that game. But they've competed in these games, but they haven't made the play to take over a game or to you've got to get a stop here. It's 3rd and 12. You have to get this stop. Somebody step up and make a play. It doesn't happen. Or offensively, then somebody's got to, it's 4th and 1, 4th and 2. We've got to have it, and it doesn't happen. And so, that to me is the biggest thing that this team hasn't done until, I guess you'd say Deuce took over that game on Saturday, and maybe he can be that kind of guy when he's healthy. But they're a somewhat flawed team, and I think in some of these games they just have not risen above. And again, go back to the Virginia game. I just think they had some opportunities to maybe put that game away, and whether it's Jerry Wilson going for the pick 6, whether it's Deuce catching the ball in the end zone. There's just a lot of opportunities where guys didn't make the play that maybe could have changed the game. But I don't think it's like they've been far off. I think they've been right there. And other than the Miami game, and even that game was kind of, and I think there was a couple of busts. I just think poor plays, or a few poor plays. There were big portions of that game where I thought they were competitive with Miami. They just got into a big hole. So, I just think it's a good team. It should have been have a better record than it does, but they just haven't made those plays, and they've let the ACC refs kind of screw them in a few situations. Which, by the way, I hate that Dabo. The call that he got fined for complaining about, he should have been complaining, right? Like, it was a bad call.
Yeah.
So I don't get this. I don't understand why everybody involved, the coaches, the players, the administrators, the media, everybody can be criticized, but the officials can't ever be criticized, even when they're blatantly wrong. I just hate that. I hate the fact that Dabo not that Dabo's going to miss the 10 grand or whatever it was, but it's just ridiculous to me that your officiating is as bad as it is every week. It's been awful for Florida State until Saturday. They got some decent calls Saturday, some good calls probably, but except for the one pass interference. But, for a month, they've gotten screwed in a bunch of different situations, and we don't really talk about it because, it's kind of a loser's mentality, but they have gotten some awful calls. And if you complain about it, you get fined. I just think that's BS. If the calls are bad, they're bad.
Yeah, no, that's just objectively true. And the ACC are trying to be a little bit more transparent because they'll give you the window into the replay system. So they're taking these extra steps to prove either their prowess, probably too far of a word, but to prove their process. And you're right. If something's just wrong, and oftentimes if it's really bad, you'll have a pool reporter speak to an official who says, yeah, we missed it. Well, okay, that should open the door in that moment. I can recall there are some major examples of Florida State history, but remember way back when in basketball, Florida State was on the road at Duke and the official got suspended for the next game after that particular moment.
Alexander Johnson.
Yes, and they forgot the down in Gainesville not that long ago. I think that's just before they went back and reverted to home field, home conference officiating for Florida and Florida State head-to-head. Yeah, man, if something is just blatantly wrong, then we need to ride with that. And you're human too. I think people would understand that more than they would the idea of this is not spoken of, especially in an era too where you're allowing gambling to happen. Like it's more important that you acknowledge the mistake rather than allow people to conspiracy theory their way through things. So yeah, I totally agree. But it's great to see Dabo pissed, and it's great to see him petty. And frankly, Ira, watching him chew out his defense on the sideline on Saturday, and those kids looking the other way as he's yelling at him, this could be an interesting sideline watching game for both teams on Saturday night in Death Valley.
Yeah, I have completely no idea what to expect from this game. It wouldn't surprise me again. I'm going to go into it assuming that the players' hatred for Florida State will get them on board and get them focused this week. But in a way that they would not be fired up for a Duke game at home or Syracuse game or some of these other teams they've lost to. But on the flip side, they do look like a dumpster fire. And I've been saying since early the season when Dabo had his first marathon press conference where he basically said, you guys want me here, if you guys don't want me here, I'll go somewhere else, but I'm not going to retire. I think he's been planning to leave. I think he's leaving. I don't know where he's going. I don't even know if he knows where he's going, but I just think he feels like the time has come there. And if that's true, it can go off the rails. And it seems like it's gone off the rails. So we'll see. But on the flip side, yeah, I mean, Florida, it's hard to say Florida State's going to go on the road and beat anybody because as bad as they look at Stanford, and they didn't play well against Virginia either. So, to me, this game, anything could happen.
It did feel like Jimbo's Symphony number 2. The notes were being played by Dabo, and they have been this season, right? I mean, he's going with they and y'all in terms of the administration and also all these openings around the country right now. Dabo's name would be coveted at this point because so many of the guys that were initially thought to be going to either a Penn State or an LSU or an Auburn, they might be signing and staying where they are. At that point, this would be the time to jump and reset somewhere else if you're Dabo.
I think 100%. I mean, listen, man, the message gets stale for everybody, after a while, unless you can keep reinventing yourself. But, it's like Georgia right now. They've been close to, losing a couple games. And if you go a few years at Georgia without making the playoff or not having great success, then people start getting antsy. I don't think in this era, it was one thing in the old era when everything wasn't so exposed and you didn't see every play of every game. Again, for our younger audience, our younger viewers who may not even know that this world existed, but like when I was in college, which wasn't 100 years ago, it was 30 years ago, you didn't get to see your team play every week. A lot of times they were, sometimes they were on pay-per-view. They were not on broadcast television every week. And sometimes you may have had to watch them the next day on cable. And so everything and then you didn't get the video interviews every day after practice and you didn't hear, it was just the immersion that you get now, I think leads to, just the messages getting stale sooner. And so to me, I don't know how many coaches are going to last 20, 25 years or more to school. And Dabo's been there a long time now. And to me, it seems like he may be ready to kind of have a different audience.
I want to talk about that stale point in just a minute, but tonight's program is brought to you by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, a longtime sponsor of Warchant.com's endeavors and in his third year as the sponsor here of the Monday Smash on Warchant TV. State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, brick and mortar operations on the east coast of the state. We'll go with Orange Park today. The phone number for Orange Park, 904-276-9535, 904-276-9535. A larger-than-life figure, if you meet him in person, a larger-than-life Nole in a lot of different ways when you're talking about supporting Florida State as an institution, the collective, the boosters, coaches, clubs, you name it. Russ Voorhis has been involved. So if you like supporting Noles, Ira, if people are out there and they want to support people who support Florida State athletics, not just Warchant.com, which we're grateful for, Russ Voorhis is your guy. He's as passionate as they come.
Yeah, and listen, man, I think there's two kinds of people in this world: the people that have needed insurance claims. They've been on the wrong side of something, and they need their insurance agent to come through, and their insurance agency to come through, and the underwriters to come through. And then people that don't realize how important that is, because when you're in that situation, you need somebody you can rely on, somebody you can trust. And we really think Russ Voorhis is that guy. And the fact that he is a Nole, he loves Florida State. He loves helping Florida State Seminole fans. He'll take your business if you're not a Nole. He'll take your business. Reach out to Russ and go to russvoorhis.com. But certainly, if you are a Florida State fan, give him a shot. Try to get a quote, get information, find out what their coverage provides in all areas of your life, from obviously your car to your, health insurance, to everything else, you get property insurance, everything you need. Go to russvorhis.com is the website, and they'll help you out.
Florida, Georgia, Alabama, y'all are covered with Russ Vorhis, russvorhis.com, russvorhis.com. So on the point of staleness, do you think, Ira, that this win could unstale Florida State and the talking points around Mike Norvell, or is this simply a weekend in which you think when it's all said and done at the end of the year, it was a nice moment and an exhale for Florida State? Everybody could put everything on pause and just enjoy an evening on homecoming. But there's still some bumps to come down the road. Where do you think we are on the 3rd of November?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is totally I think the only way the fan base is going to get behind Mike Norvell is if he just wins on an incredible level. Now, I know there's some individual fans. I've talked to some fans over the last week who, came to me and said things or emailed. I got a nice email from a guy yesterday where, Mike Norvell went to the Valdosta Lions football game late last week. And this gentleman who's an FSU fan, his wife is battling cancer, and somebody mentioned it to Mike Norvell. So he recorded a video and sent it to them. And so this, he's got a lifelong fan there, and he's done a ton of those things. And there are some fans who, guy said to me last week, nobody ever talks about the fact that none of our guys get in trouble and they're a fun team to root for. And does that not matter at all? So there are people out there that are not beating their chest and screaming about Mike Norvell needs to be fired, who do support him. But for the masses, he would have to win at an incredibly high level to get people back on board. And I think that's where I don't shut the door on him surviving in this job just because what if he does win these last 4 games? I don't expect that to happen. But if he does, now they've got a tough decision to make. But that doesn't change, though. If it were to happen, that doesn't change a lot of the criticisms are valid. Like the criticisms about the high school recruiting, valid, 100% valid. The criticisms about player development, valid. The criticism about evaluations and players you've invested time in. I was talking to somebody today about some players on last year's team that, you missed on the portal guys, but you also invested 4 or 5 years into some of these receivers, Kentron and Darion, and guys who just never materialized. And so you got to know that as a coach that if there's something there or not. Like, so they've failed in a lot of different ways. So I understand the criticisms, but I do think if you win the last 5 games and you finish 8-4, it's going to be a tough decision to make.
Quick aside, which makes you more angry and wanting to jump up and down and say, please, people, listen to me? Was it the continued belief in that crop of wide receivers that you brought up tonight? Or is it that Virginia as a football team this year is really not that good? Which one has you jumping up and down a little bit more, saying, for real, I'm serious, please listen? Because I know you have had that feeling about Tony Elliott's program too.
Much more about the receivers. But yeah, no, I do. I know it's smoke and mirrors. And listen, man, I like Tony Elliott. I think he's a good coach. And I think he's kind of gotten a raw deal in some situations. Man, he had one of his players pulled out a gun and shot several of the other players on the team. I mean, that's an unbelievably terrible situation that he had to coach through. Plus, it's a tough job. So I think Tony Elliott back in those days at Clemson, I thought he was made the brains of that operation. I think he's a good coach. But man, all the bad luck he's had, it's like coming back the other way all in this one season. And I don't know that I believe they're as good as they look right now. I don't think they're number 12 in the country, but they are, the receivers to me. I remember arguing with Jeff and Corey last year and like last spring or summer because Corey kept bringing up Portier and how and I'm not trying to dog this kid, but like, this could be his year. And it's like, man, what have you seen in 4 years that makes you think that this is going to be the year? But there's a lot of situations like that. There's a lot of players that they've either missed on or invested too much time on. So yeah, man, when I push back on people a little bit, I retweeted David Hale's tweet today, which there's some metrics that show that Florida State's actually a much better team than a 4-4 team right now. Like if you look at the analytics, they should be better than they are. They've had some bad luck, and I also think some bad officiating. But that doesn't mean the criticisms aren't valid. So I see where people are coming from, but I also think, man, if you win 8 games after going 2-10, and if you win your last 5 games, and if you've beaten Alabama, Florida, and Clemson, 2 of those guys on the road, I feel like it's hard to fire that guy. But I also understand the people who want to move on.
Yeah, from the preseason perspective, if you went 8-4 with those 3 wins that you're talking about, you said, well, he's definitely back for another year. But it's just, you'd also ask immediately in that follow-up, you'd be like, well, who the hell did you lose to, and how'd you lose to him if you went 8-4 and you win, 3 of the 4 big 4 games, as we call them, before the season started? But this has been a really strange year, and I feel like I'm starting to watch this sport like I used to, well, like I always have watched the NFL, in terms of these games are all so close. In general, if I see spreads, like I'm in a free league here in Tallahassee, it's not money. It's just you pick 20 games a week. If I see a spread that's north of 7.5, like I'm just going to take the underdog, because this year is insane. The games are too close, too consistently. There are some blowouts. Indiana will deliver a blowout. It seems like Ohio State is getting to that place where they're going into overdrive as well. But by and large, if you see 7.5, 10.5 points, you might want to take the underdog, and you're probably going to win more often than not. Glad to see Florida State obviously covered this week, but Florida State feels like, to me, I'll go back to the old 16-game schedules because that's easier. It feels like a team that could go 9-7, 10-6 if everything went their way, but if things don't go their way, they could go 6-10 or 7-9. But they're not altogether that far different from a team that will make the playoffs in a wild card. So to your example, I'll pull Virginia. I think you got Spider-Man going on, pointing at each other here between Florida State and Virginia. It's just a lot of those games on the margin, literally several overtime games, go Virginia's way. For Florida State, a lot of those games don't. The problem for me as a fan with Mike has been, you see this kind of death spiral, and it culminated with that effort against Stanford, which is like a lower class loss, where you say, well, that's more than just luck, how you lose to a program like Stanford on a Saturday night. But still, I can hold two of those things at the same time. Like, would you agree that Florida State, if you just look at the ACC, the top 6 in the standings, they're not that different from the teams that are up in that top 6 group, even though Florida State finds themselves in the bottom 3, bottom 4?
No, I definitely agree with that. But the Stanford game is the one that it muddies everything because it was so gross. And again, at the time that you lost to Pitt, they had a freshman quarterback who had just come off his first big start and looked great, but you're kind of thinking he's going to come down to earth. And Florida State's game plan was, I thought, terrible. I thought they had a bad approach against him, and it backfired, and they ended up losing that game. The Virginia game, again, like that's one where to me, that's not a fireable offense to lose at Virginia on a Friday night in double overtime. And where another game where things went against you, the Pitt game, I thought the officiating went against you. I mean, it's just, so there's been things that have kept them from, again, we never thought this was going to be a dominant team. We thought maybe you'd be a team that could win 8 games. But when you lose 4, it just looks so bad. And one of them is that Stanford game. The Stanford game is going to be, if they end up having to fire Mike Norvell, I mean, that game is going to be the one that, everybody can just point to as, okay, it was not going to work out.
We're going to get your questions here if you have some in the chat right now. We've got nearly, over 1,000 across the multimedia network, around 400 of you on YouTube. Give us a thumbs up as you're watching the show and subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. If you have questions for us, Director Nick Carlisle behind the scenes will star those. We've got a few that we will address here in just a moment after this 15-second message from our sponsor, State Farm agent Russ Borges.
Contact Russ Boris for an auto quote today.
So Daniel asks here on the Monday Smash, is Sawchuk injured? He hasn't made much of an impact the last 2 games. No, I mean, there's no real designation that I'm aware of or whisper behind the scenes. I think, Ira, that Sam Singleton just earned that start, and then he earned the right to stay on the field on Saturday night.
But, man, in a season full of head scratchers, that's a big one. Because, I mean, they've given everybody else ample opportunities. And I do think Usman Kroma is still super talented. I think he's got a chance to be a big-time college running back. Sawchuk's been solid. It's interesting that Singleton got the start and delivered the way he did. I don't know what to make of it, though. It's almost, confounding because, he really hadn't played much at all the last 4 or 5 games. And, you've been giving all these other guys opportunities. Again, that's not to say that coaches can't be wrong. It's just interesting. I'm curious what pushed them over the edge. Mike Norvell says he's playing with a lot more confidence. We always knew he had the elite speed. I think we didn't know how he would run in traffic. And there was a run or two in that game that I think either maybe more experienced or with better vision, he could have got more. It's not like he was flawless, but man, it was cool to see, because that's the thing about Sawchuk. It just seems like in this offense, it seems like a lot of his runs are pretty slow developing. And then, Chroma has not been maybe the phenom a lot of people were hoping for. So, at least Singleton, maybe he gives you more of that big play threat with his speed. So yeah, man, I'm glad to see it, but I don't know. Yeah, I haven't heard anything about Sawchuk being hurt. He just has not looked real explosive when we've seen him play.
So one thing they mentioned on the broadcast on Saturday is the coaches told them, Gus Malzahn told the broadcast crew, that they would ride the hot hand if somebody started off well. And I guess that would be Singleton. But the other part of it is, this is a working theory. Obviously, no practice access anymore. I just wonder if maybe he was doing a lot of the right things over the bye week or in practice, and they wanted to reward him maybe as a sign to the rest of the roster at some positions. Maybe they want to pick some guys and play them and give them more snaps. And then from there, Sam kind of took the ball literally and ran with it. That's the best theory I got on that one, because Sawchuk should be perfectly healthy. And it's not like there have been major deficiencies in his game, Ira. So, and we also thought this season coming into it that Gus Malzahn would end this nightmare of over-rotating players. And last year's rotation at running backs is one of the things that drove my ass nuts. You're still rotating a lot of different dudes back there, but Sam made him look pretty smart with his effort on Saturday.
Yeah, he did. And yeah, I guess theoretically, if he doesn't run well early in that game, they go to Sawchuk or go to somebody else. And Sawchuk did play in the game and looked pretty good when he was in there. So yeah, it may have been a situation where you give him a shot and see what he does, but then he actually did well. So they give him more shots. It's not like he was on the field a ton. I think, he had the 14, 15 carries, but he was only on the field like 20 plays. It wasn't like he was Singleton was the featured guy the entire game, but when he was in there, he really delivered.
Got a question from Jammin 2 Shirts. Says, if we go bowling, which one is the most appropriate? And do you have any Heisman favorites? Well, on the front end, I can't imagine Florida State's looking at a formerly New Year's Six bowl with where they stand right now in the standings. Is there one that jumps out to you, sir?
The projection I think ESPN's putting out there is with Gasparilla. That's where they've got him right now, which is in, I think, like December 19th or something. Ridiculous.
Yep.
But man, I'm all for that. My daughter's in Tampa at grad school. You'd love to go back to Tampa. So yeah, man, I got no problem with that. Any bowl would be good, especially because whether it's this coaching staff or the next coaching staff, those practices are valuable. So I do think there's merit to being and going to a bowl game. I think it's good for the fan base to just kind of get back into the idea that your season's not over on the Thanksgiving weekend. But beyond that, man, it's hard to imagine them going much better than that. So I got no problem with Tampa.
Yeah, Tampa's good on the 19th. It's a Friday, too. That game will be done ahead of the playoff beginning, because the playoff's going to be nuts this year, man. Like, I'm excited. It felt like when they devised this 12-team playoff that first round was going to be nothing, because all the teams that had the bye weeks were the only ones that had a real chance to hoist the trophy anyway. Not so anymore. No. So you could get that game, have it completed, and end the season, and then begin watching the playoff, which I think is going to be – the Invitational is going to be interesting. I'm voting for the Pinstripe Bowl. I want to go up to New York.
All right.
Saturday, the 27th of December. We get through the holidays. I mean, I'm sure that we could do a 26th travel day, and we can Zoom on those press conferences on like the 24th. Unless, Ira, you want to take the family up to the city for Christmas. It is a noon kickoff on Saturday, the 27th. Who says no? That sounds great to me. Sounds
good, buddy. Sounds good. The only downside is having to walk into that stadium, but other than that, man, it could be cool.
We would agree on that point, 100%. Well, I'll take you to some of the pizza hunts. I will make that trip, even if it ain't on the expense. I got it. I want to go make that trip to the Pinstripe Bowl. And then Heisman favorites, I don't know. I mean, Mendoza is going to be talked about a lot at Indiana because they just keep kicking people's butts, and he's the quarterback. I feel like Sayan has started to play well for Ohio State as well, if you're looking for somebody that catches heat late. But Mendoza, quarterback of a really fun team, maybe? What do you think?
Yeah, no, he's got a great shot. I think Ole Miss's quarterback, I think, is an interesting story.
Yep.
And he's playing at a high level. We'll see how far they go. But yeah, man, it's pretty freaking wide open. I mean, I don't know that you could get a defensive guy in, but maybe if you could, this might be the year.
You're right about that. Yes, it feels like it's wide open, much like the sport itself. You're like, I don't know. There's a lot of teams that do a lot of up and downs. And I wonder, Ira, if they're going to penalize kids for losing the way that they used to when there was just a clear-cut finalist list of 4 or 5 dudes. The voting could be really widespread this year. No Potal says, we got a fumble recovery. First in 8 games? Yeah. First against, let's see, I'll have director Nick put it in the chat. He had the last power opponent fumble recovery. I know Sean Murphy, Ira, was the last player to recover a fumble for Florida State, and that was late last season. But I think it's over a calendar year since Florida State pulled one off against a power opponent. Could you believe it with your own eyes in the press box? Did you have to double take and check for flags?
It was hard to believe. But, that's again, I'm not trying to make excuses. But the 4 losses, the fact that you lost 4 games, 3 of them were very close, and you could not get any of those fumbles. I mean, not only did you not get the fumbles, but almost every one of those fumbles by the opponents ended up like gaining more yards. Like they'd fumble, and then like their own guy would get it for an extra 5 yards, or it would hit a guy right in stride on the fumble. So not only do you not recover them, but a lot of times it worked out better for them and the officiating. Again, I'm just again, I'm not saying that they should be 7-1 or whatever it would be at this point, but man, they have had some bad luck and some bad officiating during those losses.
Agreed. Eric says, I don't understand how the big money folks let their feelings about Mike being a nice guy factor into it. Producing results is key to becoming big money people, and Mike's not producing. Well, that assumes that that particular part of it and Mike's personality would be something that prevents people from acting. I think it gives him the benefit of the doubt if it's 50-50, but right now I don't think it's 50-50. Ira, how would you assess this?
Yeah, I would think, it's, to me, it's something that helps you, but it's not like it's going to sway a decision. I think it gives you a little bit more leeway. Again, I think when you look at Brian Kelly, if Brian Kelly was well-liked at LSU, I don't think he'd be fired at this point. I think if Jimbo was well-liked at Texas A&M, I don't think he would have been fired when he was. So it can't hurt you. I don't know that it's going to keep you in a job if you don't deserve to be in a job. And yeah, that, like you said, there's a premise to that question that's what's happening. And I don't know that that's true. Again, my thought is that it's not the fact that they didn't fire him after Stanford wasn't because they don't plan to fire him at all. It's because they want to figure out what they're going to do over these next few weeks before they make a decision, because it is a huge decision. I mean, you're talking about, all told, you're talking about, $80-90 million. It's a ton of money. So I don't think they want to make a rash decision. And my point has been that I don't, we can disagree about this, but I don't know there's a huge benefit. I don't know that Florida is in some great position right now because they fired Napier 2 weeks ago compared to Florida State if they fire him on Sunday. So to me, I wouldn't take the fact they haven't fired him yet as that it's really a vote of confidence. I think they're just trying to figure out what they're going to do.
Yeah, and for sure, if Mike was a hot commodity like James Franklin, and you knew he was going to be on the open market, you would want to make the move sooner so that, he could conduct these interviews. But unfortunately, this is kind of the reason we're stuck here is I don't know that people are lining up to talk to Mike Norvell as their next head coach. They might as a coordinator, a position coach, maybe, but not as a head man, even though there are so many openings. And I think you brought this up a couple of weeks ago, if it wasn't last week, that one of the working theories could be, hey, what if Mike racks up a couple of wins and he becomes more attractive on the open market at that point if Florida State still wants to make the move? Well, he got one. If he gets this one this weekend against Clemson, maybe if you still want to make the move at the end of the month, Ira, then Mike would at least fetch a couple more interviews and a few more dollars that could help offset what Florida State needs to pay. I do want to advance that talking point, though, that discussion about the next move. Let's just assume for a moment that Florida State does make a move. Here's Jeffrey Smith. Do you think these coordinators deserve 2 years to see what they can do? If you fire Mike and them after 1 year, how do you ever attract a decent staff to come here during this coaching carousel? So I'm going to reframe this question, Jeffrey, if you'll bear with me. Let's say that they do make a move, Ira, and they want to bring in a new head coach. Might they try to talk that head coach into keeping the coordinator on the other side of the ball for 1 more year? I know that's not a perfect answer, but if you're trying to pinch pennies a little bit, I wonder if they might not say, if it's an offensive coach, hey, will you give Tony 1 more year? Or if it's a defensive coach, hey, will you give Gus another year to run this offense? Or do you think that that would be a terrible idea?
I mean, they can ask, but man, coaches don't want anybody to stay around because they don't trust the people that were there before.
Mm-hmm.
In general, now it would be a little bit different because it's not like Tony White's a Mike Norvell guy. But in general, when a new coaching staff comes in, they want to clear house from every assistant coach to people that work in the office, to people in the, they want to make sure that everybody's going to be loyal to them and not, loyal to the last guy. So, could it come up in a conversation like, hey, by the way, we have a couple guys here under contract if you want to go look at them. But at the very first hint of, nah, I'm not real interested in that, like Florida State would just have to say, okay, we got it. I mean, you're not going to try to, there's nobody that they're going to hire, I don't think, that they can kind of push that on. It's you're going to eat those contracts. And now Tony White will go get another job. Gus, he'll have to decide if they do it, and Gus has to move on. He'll have to decide what he wants to do. He was close to retirement last year at UCF, so he may decide he's done. But I don't think, unless there's a pre-existing relationship and those guys, and there's some reason that it makes sense, I would think it's very unlikely that those guys stay.
Yeah, to your second question, if you fire Mike, how do you ever attract a decent staff? It's a tough answer, Jeffrey.
Well, no, but I don't know that anybody holds that against you in terms of if the head coach changes. I think all coaches understand that that's just life. I mean, you agreed to take a job in a school with a guy who went 2-10 last year. That was an inherent risk. So that I don't think anybody's going to think that Florida State wronged either of those coaches.
Yeah, fair. That's correct. Brett says to both of you, I know you don't have time to follow Clemson closely, but Dabo very specifically called out his defensive back play and blamed the coaches, emphasizing the safety coach. Will Deuce have a career day? This is the fun part of the breakdown because Clemson's offense looks fine, but Clemson's defense looks like it would rather be in Columbia, and I mean the country, not South Carolina. It is interesting to me what Florida State could do offensively this weekend. Not just Deuce, Ira, but there are some teams, like, for example, watching Wake, I thought that they wouldn't bite on a lot of tricks and a lot of Gus misdirections. And I don't think they did.
Right.
This group at Clemson, I really think if Gus wants to bust out the bag of tricks, they might hit. They got to be licking their chops a little bit in that offensive coaching room with what the effort has been like from Clemson.
Not a lot of discipline, you're saying, from that Clemson defense?
No
yeah, and it's particularly to Brett's question, it has been particularly the defensive backfield. I mean, they've been terrible. And so, yeah, I mean, listen, I like the talent FSU has a receiver. I mean, Deuce is obviously Deuce. Mackay is Mackay. So we know what those guys bring, but you still haven't gotten anything really out of Squirrel White since the Alabama game. I still think he's a good player. I just don't think Tommy finds him sometimes. Lewayne McCoy, I think, has been a nice it's been a nice evolution of his young career. I think he's going to be a really good guy. I think you still have some good weapons at tight end. So yeah, man, I think that is a big part of their offense. The problem I think they've had, at least during those losses, was not only did you lose Tommy as kind of a running threat, he kind of has moved away from that, probably due to health reasons. But I think he's looked jittery in the pocket, particularly in the Stanford game, but really at other times too, where if they could calm him down or roll him out, get him some time and get him in rhythm, I think you've got a lot of really nice weapons in the passing game. But they just, because Tommy, I don't know, man, it just seems to me like Tommy, listen, man, sitting in the pocket at 5'9" or 5'10", whatever he is, it's going to be a challenge to maybe see the field. And then once he started kind of getting happy feet at times, their passing game was kind of sunk.
Well, and that's the thing about both Gus and Tommy is no matter what they do the previous game, you really have to erase the board. They're not momentum guys because Gus has had a ton of wins in his coaching career at all destinations where you go, holy cow, how did he beat Nick Saban's Alabama team that had won 15 straight games? Or then you'd say, how did he lose to Mark Stoops' Kentucky program or something along those lines? And Tommy's the same way. Like, just because he and Deuce had the connection this past weekend doesn't guarantee it's going to happen against Clemson this weekend because Tommy is inconsistent as a downfield passer. But if it's there, Ira, if Tommy has a good day, you could see some massive numbers from him this weekend.
Well, one interesting comment from Norvell after the game, but we didn't get to talk to Gus Malzahn on Sunday as we usually do. We get the coordinators on Sunday. He's had a family health situation that he's had to go help with. He's expected to be back at practice tomorrow, so that's a good thing. But he took a little time off after the game until today. But so we haven't had a chance to talk to Gus. But Mike Norvell said that they actually talked before the game about getting the ball to some of their players that they thought they had mismatches, and I think that's where Deuce came in. That's interesting to me. Like, I wonder if, because one thing I didn't watch a ton of Gus Malzahn football when he was at Auburn. I was aware of him. I watched occasionally, but I didn't watch a lot of it. Certainly, I watched him in 2013. But my impression over the first 7-8 weeks, to your point, is that he's more of a plays, not players guy. And I thought in that game, there was that 4th and 1 where they end up, it's like, man, 4th and 1, you can't run it up the middle like you did against Alabama. Why does it always have to be, a play? Like, it's got to be some action that you're trying to set something up. And so that the fact that Norvell said they had that conversation, I don't know if Norvell went to him and said, hey, man, they've got a small corner that's going to be lined up on this guy. We need to make sure we're taking shots, or if it was just part of the normal game plan. But I'm with you, man. I think, if you've got a personnel mismatch, don't just run your offense because it's your offense. And like, you like setting these things up, try to exploit those matchups.
Well, the other thing is they've been setting up the whatever the hell is on the other side of the Danzy end around all year long. Can we run that? Like, I would love to see that this week. Like, oh, that's the other part of the play. This would be the time against Clemson. Royce writes in, is it concerning to you that none of the freshman safeties can crack the lineup given how average that position looks at times? I'd extend that out to corner as well. And it's not just the freshmen. It's guys who have been here on campus for 2 or 3 years. I know that it's a new system, and so you're asking new things of these players, but now you've got a few new sets of eyes on this group. Sertan's been here for a few years now, but Evan Cooper specifies and specializes in the secondary. Tony White obviously has his eyes on all levels of the defense. For all of the fanfare, Ira, on signing day that Florida State's had specifically in the defensive back room the last few years, it's been one of those bright and shiny places, kind of like tight end has been. The payoff hasn't really been there. Florida State's relying on very few people at all those positions, corner and safety.
Yeah, but you can't say that they're not considering the other guys, because Shamar Arnaud has just, skyrocketed past all those guys for whatever reason. I mean, he obviously has beaten out, Kai Bates, Charles Lester, all those guys. And he was working at safety before they had to move him to corner when Quindarius Jones got hurt. So, I think the door is open if guys play, but I mean, I think Patrick Surtain, the way he came in the first year or two, I thought the play was impressive. I like what he did with the secondary, particularly the cornerbacks. I mean, I think he's coached really well. We don't know as much about Evan Cooper, who came over from Nebraska. I can't say that he's a good coach or bad coach because we just haven't seen him much. But in terms of, the fact that it's not like they're not playing any young players. They are playing Shamar Arnaud. So he's beaten out those guys. I'm more curious about why those guys haven't developed. Now, is it development or were they misses? And it's only 2 years. It's early. But, Kai Bates didn't even get on the field last week. I don't think he's played the last couple of weeks. Charles Lester has not played much. And the one he did finally get in the Stanford game, he gave up that big pass, the long third down conversion. So he hasn't played great when he's been in there. So, yeah, man, I'm curious because they have had some high-profile DB signings. Jamari Howard's one that he got injured when he got here, and I think he's been injured again during preseason camps, and that set him back. But overall, yeah, those guys have not. That's a position you usually could get on the field pretty quickly, and we haven't seen it with a lot of those young DBs.
Florida, Alabama, Seminole. Hey, that's 2 out of 3 states that Russ Forrest covers. If you were Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Seminole, you'd be all 3. What happened to Squirrel? Where's he been? This is just one of those, I think, just ask it into the wind questions. This is a tough one, isn't it? Like, it's just Squirrel had the big play in that first, it wasn't the first third down, but the second third down of the season. 3rd and 9, throw deep to the right. Florida State then, after they completed inside the 5-yard line, goes tempo, they score, and it's 7-7, Florida State, Alabama. And it feels like there's a burner on that side. Deuce Robinson's got speed, and he's got size. This passing attack is going to be ferocious. And since then, he's basically been a punt returner and a guy that maybe yeah, that's right. And the ball sails over his head a couple of times. I don't have any theories other than there just isn't a chemistry or connection. What do you think, sir?
Yeah, that's all I've got. I mean, for whatever reason, Tommy just doesn't either see him because there's been times he's been open, but then there's been times he wasn't open and they got forced to him and it was picked off. So it's can't, it just hasn't clicked with those two. I don't know why. I do think Mekhi Danzy emerging as a guy with his elite speed, because I mean, he's a faster, bigger Squirrel White. So maybe that's part of it, but Squirrel's playing. It's not like he's not playing. The ball never finds him. I don't know if that's a function of Gus's offense or, they're just not on the same page. But yeah, he's playing. He was banged up earlier this season, but he's healthy now. And it's weird. It's not like he's been terrible when they have thrown the ball his way. It's just, they just haven't connected.
I see Forgotten Angler in all caps says he has not returned to punt all season. He has Forgotten Angler, but more importantly, he catches the ball. And so against the alternatives, and Florida State has exhausted the alternatives, Squirrel White is a sight for sore eyes when the ball is in the air off the foot of the punter. Let's see. We go next to Travis. The good question here. What is up with the playing surface at Doak? The weather has been sunny and perfect. Why did it look wet? Why were guys sliding all over the place? Nobody had the right cleats on Saturday night, sir. There were a lot of golf, like hacker-sized divots out there and dudes sliding around either that are trying to make a tackle or make a guy miss. Both teams had that problem all night.
Yeah, no, we haven't had a chance to ask anybody about that. We probably should have, but just hasn't worked out that way. But yeah, no, the playing surface looked terrible. And so for people that don't remember or weren't paying attention, they actually put down this surface right before the season. It's called a lay and play surface. It's basically, they brought in that whole field. It's not like a field that has been in the ground for 6 months. It really was brought in right before the season started, but ostensibly it's supposed to take root really quickly. And because it's so deep that you can play on it all season, not have any problems. It did not look good at all. They have one more home game, so you just got to get through that. But man, that was an expensive investment to get that field in here, and it certainly didn't look good. I guess 4 games into the home schedule.
You don't need something that's nearly $500,000 to be something that you're just like, all right, please get us through that last game. We'll see what comes of it. But if we didn't, if there is no answer, it's because Florida State won 42-7. It wasn't going to come up. The net effect of the slippage went Florida State's way on Saturday night. Florida Man in Alabama says, I'm seeing posts that the Queen of Spanks was at the Wake game with Alford. Does that mean we're getting more for players or new coaches? If Sarah Blakely ever got involved, first of all, that's one of those things like the legend of Destin Hill. Like, it's a message board topic that came up over and over and still comes up over and over again. Could you imagine, Ira, if Spanx Stadium became a reality and Florida State magically had that type of support? People have been calling for that for decades.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, she was there. She put a bunch of photos and videos on her Instagram, which is awesome. It's probably the biggest off-the-field win since maybe Destin Hill showed up on campus a few years ago. But, it's that's something that they've been working on forever. The conventional wisdom was that Sarah Blakely didn't have a ton of interest in sports, certainly when she was at Florida State, but it looked like it was a great visit. She toured all the facilities. It looked like, judging from her pictures and videos, they took her into the new facility. She went around campus, got to hang out with Mark Ziegler, our friend Mark Ziegler, who was one of her old professors. And it seems like it was a great visit. On the one hand, if I'm Mike Norvell, I'm like, really? I'm leaving and you get you get Spanx on board? But maybe they have to be on board to help him his separation agreement. We'll see. But it's definitely a good thing that she was there and she seemed like she was having a great time.
Maybe we should get Matt and Michael to work on an official visit story for Sarah Blakely. And people around Sarah have said that she really enjoyed the pitch during the football-only facility brunch. Jake says in the chat, this is FSU. Who cares about a bowl game in 2025? All right, let me answer this, Jake. Because I'm the guy who's talking about outrageous and farce. I'm an angry guy when it comes to where the situation is with Mike Norvell. I care about the bowl game in 2025. Those practices do mean a lot for whoever the head coach is. And Ira, you brought it up earlier in the program tonight. I know. I don't want to be, limping over the finish line to get to 6 wins for a friggin' bowl game in Tampa on the 19th of December. I got you. I'm with you there. These practices are critical, though, because Florida State's roster is going to be in a serious place of transition one way or the other come next month. And you need to start vetting what you got and what you don't. And that's why I think Unfortunately, it's critical, but Ira, it is critical if Florida State gets to a bowl.
Yeah, and every team's different, and again, if you got an older team, maybe it's not that big of a deal, but you do have a young team. You have not a young team, but you have a bunch of young guys. Those offensive linemen, I mean, would you not want 15 more practices with Herb Hand and those young offensive linemen, whether or not he's the offensive line coach next year or not? Like, I just think that those yeah, man, there's a lot of guys on this team that you're going to need to play next year. You're not going to bring in 60 new portal players. They need some of these guys to develop. And they've got guys that, had good seasons that you'd like to keep developing. So yeah, man, I think it would be really good if they could play a bowl game. Whether or not fans get excited about a bowl game in mid-December or not, it definitely would be important.
As we're wrapping up tonight's program, again, our thanks to State Farm agent Russ Forrest for sponsoring the Monday Smash. Just wonder, Ira, this feels like limbo, purgatory, you name it. That's where we are right now. But it is Clemson week, and Florida State is coming off of an ass kicking, and they delivered it to Wake Forest. How does this week set up? How do you frame this week in your mind as Florida State's now 4-4? They're off the ACC schneid. They got to win, and now they're facing a Clemson team that who knows what they're going to look like on Saturday. How do you make sense of what you're about to cover and what we're about to talk about for the next 6 days?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a standpoint, on one side of the ball, there's a pretty compelling story. I mean, Clemson's offense is putting up huge numbers. Cade Klubnik is, been there a long time now. They've got some weapons. They've got some talent, and they put up a lot of yards, over 500 yards of offense, scored over 40 points this last game. So that side of the ball, that matchup is worth discussing. The other side of the ball, it's hard to. Their defense is kind of looks like they've cashed it in. But from a big picture standpoint, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any way to handicap this. On the one hand, we don't know if Clemson wants to keep playing for Dabo Swinney. On the other hand, we don't know if this Florida State team is mentally tough enough to go on the road and play well against anybody. So it's just impossible to me to handicap. The point spread is what it is, probably because of that. How could anybody feel super strongly about either team? But I do think, like I said, when I was talking to you and Jeff today on Jeff's show, I don't know that they can have 100% clarity on what they're going to do exactly from an administration standpoint until these games play out. And if Florida State goes up there and looks terrible, that could be the end of the road. If they somehow win this game or lose closely, but then you lose to Virginia Tech at home, that could be. So I guess my whole thing is we're all just waiting to see how this thing plays out. And I think the path to Mike Norvell keeping his job is probably pretty narrow and filled with a lot of rough terrain. I don't know that he's going to be able to make it through that, but I do think that path still exists. It seems like it still exists, but it seems much more likely that he's going to fall off the path and they're going to have to go in a new direction. But we don't know when that's going to be, and so much that's just going to be determined by how these games play out.
Yeah, we're going to list Mike Norvell as week to week. That's what we're going to do on the coaching hot seat report. It's week to week. Final question, some levity from our guy, Florida Man in Alabama. Thank you for being a member of Warchant Premier. Will Ira, Jeff, Aslan, Corey, and Tom all wear Spanx on air if we hear Bobby Bowden Field at Spanx Stadium in 2026? I will take the pledge. I will wear Spanx if we find out, not even like it could be the stadium naming or not. If we hear or we see an email that there is a large capital contribution from Spanx, and maybe it's in conjunction with a separate release, Ira, that talks about new coaches or whatever. But if we hear, and you know how Florida State likes to send those releases out when people contribute a lot of money, that Sarah Blakely's on board, I will wear Spanx at some point in the 2026 season.
I think, don't they have some kind of man's version of it? I think they've got some sort of man's version of it. We'll roll with that. I don't know if
there a man's version? I'm searching right now. I'm doing this on the company Google too.
I think there's got to be an option. That's a big market that she's not going to just let somebody else take.
It's called Spanx Men's. There you go. Absolutely. So yes, we will. I will wear Spanx, Florida Man in Alabama. What's coming up this week, good sir, on the website as we cover and get set for a rivalry game, Florida State and Clemson?
Well, starting off with, I think tonight I'll have a story on or Henshaw's house is coming up. Talked to Coach Henshaw this morning. Give his take on where things are, kind of what he wants to see from this football team going forward. We got basketball season opener tomorrow night. So Matt and Corey both have stories about that. Corey's got a story, just kind of more of a normal game preview type story. Matt's got kind of a season preview look at this Florida State men's basketball team. So if you haven't been to one of the exhibitions or you haven't seen them yet, you want to read that, kind of breaking down all the players that they're going to have on this team, because it's a whole new looking team. And then, yeah, man, just lots of football coverage. We'll have a story, I think, on Sam Singleton coming pretty quickly based on his emergence this past weekend. Plenty more coverage coming throughout the week. It's going to be fun, man. Corey and I are going to go up there, try to talk Aslan to go into Clemson, but he backed out. I think he's going to pass on this one. But Corey and I'll be up there, so hopefully we'll have some good road trip stories to share as well.
Are you in the same car? No way.
For part of it, just from Atlanta up.
Oh,
that's all we need. Corey and I just need a good couple hours to get into a nice scrape. So it could be an adventure. Yeah, if we were going from Tallahassee to Clemson, then there's no doubt there would be some issues.
You need helmets and hockey gloves and all kinds of stuff for that. Got to get the smoking pig, says Director Nick behind the scenes. I've never been there.
Last time we were there, I think we ran into Nick. Nick and his family, I think, were there. I believe that was the case. So, it's definitely a good place to go.
We appreciate Director Nick's contributions behind the scenes. Again, he brought us the note that Florida State's fumble recovery was the first against a power opponent since Juice Cryer picked up the ball against SMU last year. So
I was a little surprised by the Sean Murphy one. Did Sean Murphy recover a fumble last year? Maybe he did.
He did against the FCS team, Charleston Southern. Yeah. So Sean Murphy with his he's in the record books as a Florida State linebacker. Yeah.
That's the thing. I can't. I'm not trying to make excuses, but man, it's just crazy how these fumbles. It's not like they've been there. Remember the game when Dontavius Jackson and Kalen Brooks fought for or whoever it was. There was like two guys on Willie's team that fought for a fumble, and they ended up not getting it. And the other team got it. It's not
Zach Simpson on the road. Where was
I can't remember. I'm sure somebody in the chat will, but it's not like it's been those things. They just literally every fumble has gone right to the other team or gone out of bounds or whatever. It's been crazy, man. So maybe these last 5 weeks, these last 4 games after Saturday, maybe they're going to get calls, they're going to get breaks, and it's going to change our outlook on things, Tom. We'll see.
And hey, I'll leave everybody with this. Maybe, you know what would help just turn the tide for Florida State in terms of turnovers? Bring the backpack back. Huh? Everybody, you want the backpack back? All right. Before the chat turns against me, we're going to sign off here. Thanks to our sponsor, State Farm Agent Russ Forrest. To all of you who are here who advanced the discussion with your questions and your contributions, we very much appreciate it. Hit the like button, not for the backpack joke, but for the content we have here at Warchant TV. Subscribe to the channel. It's totally free. He's Ira. I'm Tom. We both say good night on Warchant TV. This has been the Monday Smash.